The struggle of chess. We've all been there. What happens when you play a competitive chess tournament and things don't go your way? Last weekend, I played a 5-round chess tournament and things didn't go my way from the very first round. In these 5 rounds, I only played lower rated opponents, and I'm gonna show you my secret recipe to consistently beat those lower rated than you. Before we start the video, this video is sponsored by Chess Reps. For round 3 of this tournament, I learned a chess opening from scratch and played it on the board for the very first time thanks to Chess Reps. So I'm expected to play down in the first 2 rounds of this tournament, being one of the favorite, and in the first round I am paired against Gilbert Mercure, whom I haven't played in my life, I don't think. Maybe we've played, but if we did, it was a very, very long time ago. This is the first time I'm playing this tournament, which was 40 minutes out of town, and I played it with popular French content creator Julien Song. You might know him. In this first game, my opponent plays e4. He didn't have many games in the database. That is the issue when playing down, is that your opponents, they don't have much information about them on their chess out there. So you kind of have to see what you can get. And I saw that in a few of his games, he had a straight line, which was after the French defense, d4. Here, I could get a straight line after bishop d7. And I could confuse him a little bit with this non-main line. So the more popular move against the French defense advance is queen b6. So the French defense, I've only played a couple times, maybe 3 times in my life. But I had this straight line after bishop d7, bishop d3. And after takes, now I was expecting a Milner-Berry gambit, it's called, in which white sacrifices a pawn for quick development and play activity, right? But he takes back here, and I was like, oh, interesting. So now I play queen b6, and so I'm actually threatening to take this pawn. Let's say you castle and I take. Here, white doesn't have the classic trick of this discovered check on the king because I played this bishop d7 line, which is important because I am actually threatening this pawn after queen b6. But my opponent plays a different variation of the Milner-Berry gambit. He plays knight bd2, which is a less known and played line. It still equalizes, so I took, my opponent plays castles, and he's basically sacrificing a pawn to delay my development on the king side. So I'll have some trouble developing here. I'll be very, very late, and I'll have to fold my pieces down with a pawn up, try to maintain that, and develop in castle quick. So my opponent goes castles, now I take, and I play bishop b5, I'm still in book. So black is trading off their bad bishop here, which is very important in the French defense. If you get to do this in the French, that is a huge achievement for you, so congratulations. And here I felt very proud of myself because this bishop is pinned, so it will have to be traded off at some point. So my opponent goes bishop e3, which is still theory. We're still in book, believe it or not. I go queen a6, putting double pressure on this bishop, and eventually the bishop has to trade off, and I've traded off a bad bishop of mine, and I have a pawn up. Things are looking good, but we're still in book. So, and my opponent knows book here, which is insane. So he plays knight d4, attacking my queen, and the only move is queen d7 to retain equality. So although I'm a pawn up, this blockade is worth a lot for white, and the development that white has is tremendous, as well as just my lack of development. And so all of these plus and minus factors equal that this position is objectively equal, says the engine, at a very high depth. So my opponent goes rook c1. Still the best move in book. I go knight e7, so my plan is to develop this knight to c6, and I have to go like bishop e7 and castles. And now my opponent stumbles a little bit. You see, he has to keep pressure here, and by pressure he needs to play like queen d3, knight b5. I think actually the line is queen d3, knight c6, takes, and then just go up on this, like gang up on this backward pawn. Oh, not bishop c5 is what I noted for myself. So it's queen a6 here, and this equalizes. But my opponent plays pawn to a4, which is very weird to me. So maybe you might want to play knight b5, but if you don't know what black's plan is, knight b5 is a ridiculous plan because I go knight c6. And now this knight b5 threatening this check and this knight c7 are completely gone because my bishop and queen are defending everything. And the rook is not looking on c7. So my opponent goes f4 now. And Now you have to, for yourself, think of the positional aspects or traits of this position. What I said to myself is that, look, I'm up a pawn. What I want is an endgame, but I don't want to keep all the rooks on the board for the endgame because rook endgames are the most likely drawn. But I do want to keep a set of minor pieces. If I could get a dark squared bishop endgame, that would be the most likely to be a winning endgame. Next up would be 2 knights, if I could get 2 knights. And then next up would be 2 queens, that would be the most likely to be winning endgame. So those are the trades I want to do in order. I want to trade off rooks first, secondly queens, then knights, then bishops. But in general, I want trades. So this explains my next move, which is the best move of the position, knight takes d4. And so I'm trading off a pair of knights so that white's pressure is lesser, first of all, and second of all, I get to develop. So I get bishop e7 in. Bishop e7 was very hard to make happen because of this f5 that I was thinking about for a very long time. And you know when this happens to you, you're like, you think of a line for your opponent for so long. So queen here loses to rook e1 and then bishop c5 and I lose my bishop. So I have to take. So I thought for this line about this line for so long, you know, and the bishop here. And it's so hard to make out. But then the engine just says you have rook f8 and then queen takes, bishop here, and then black is completely fine here, which is insane. But I was thinking king f7, sacking the exchange. But this loses. No. What was I thinking of? Bishop f8, queen back, and then bishop g7. And here I'm fine, because I get to trade off the bishops. Although this is so weak, I'm up 2 pawns. But my opponent plays queen c2 here. No f5. And he plays it immediately, which was very surprising, because he has he needs to find play immediately. And this is such a concrete line. But then he goes queen c2. And so now you have to ask yourself, what does the opponent want? The opponent wants an infiltration via queen c7 to get on the 7th rank and try to grasp at pawns to get some compensation in the form of domination, or actually I might have to give back a pawn if queen c7 is given. But then I see a big flaw in his calculation. So he's saying queen c7 is going to happen if I castle when my queen is not attacked anymore, and this is like a virtual fork, if you will. But I just saw that I can castle anyways. The Sam Shanklin rule. If you can do it, no. If you can't, no. If your opponent prevents something, see and look if you can do it anyways. And that's what happens. After castles, my opponent, I realized, and then he realized after castles, can't play queen c7. Although this is convincing, it fails to queen takes a4. This pawn is now hanging because the queen is not defending it anymore. And so now I'm attacking the bishop. And although I'm sacking this bishop, I take back this bishop with check and 2 pawns up. So my opponent can't play queen c7 and now has to resort to b3. So I'm up a pawn fully, and I get the file now. Rook ac8. File here is the biggest accomplishment of the position. It could be equal, and gaining the file here would still be an advantage for black. But now it's -2. So the game is pretty easy. Queen d2. I go for b6. I'm just preventing this bishop. I'm making this bishop eat its words, but I'm also preventing this bishop from taking my pawn, right? So g3, which I thought was weakening for no good reason. And now I went for bishop a3. I'm attacking this rook. I want this rook to get out of the way so I can play bishop c5, and then we can trade so I can really destroy on this file with doubled rooks. But my opponent plays bishop b2, which I missed. So I play bishop back to c5 check, and now he plays bishop d4, hoping for a draw. This is not going to happen. So I go rook c7. And now I'm preparing to double my rooks on the file before anything is done. So before I take here, before he can contest. Because I'll be taking here with check and then taking whatever lies on this file. So he can't really double rooks like me. So he goes king g2. He gets out of this check prematurely, which is a good prophylactic move. I double, he takes, and now comes a very interesting part of the game. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. What would you take with? A rook or a pawn? And I think I made the wrong captures. I'll explain. I took with the b pawn. And when you take with the b pawn, you do give out this a5 square, but also you close this file on yourself. But I was saying to myself, look, I close the file. I have 2 semi-passed-ish pawns. This is a protected passed pawn, but I have a pawn to help my protected passed pawn, And these pawns are not so good. But there's queen a5, and now this proves a little bit annoying. I go h5, prophylactics to get my king out. What I think I should have done is rook takes, because after rook takes, my opponent has 0 counterplay, but I just didn't want this queen endgame. I thought that this was not enough, or it was actually a harder conversion, so I want the easiest conversion for myself as possible. So I'm keeping pieces on the board, queen a5, but as I told you before, you actually do want the queen endgame, and that's kind of a big miss in this little local part of the game, is that I should have just traded rooks, because the queen endgame objectively is just better. Even though, there's some risks of perpetual checks and stuff like that, that was the best objective decision. But here, keeping pieces is fine too. I go h5, and my opponent goes rook fd1, and now I go c4. So I'm taking the file, and I'm threatening to take another pawn, so my opponent plays queen b5, and offers the first queen trade of the game. Now, would you trade queens here, or would you keep pieces? It's a very interesting part of the game. I felt like if I traded queens, and I went rook c2 check, king here, and rook here, my opponent is allowed some play on rook a1. And now rook takes, and to me it's just not so clear. There's always a chance that this is not enough for the black pieces. Like this is -2, or -3 rather, but it's white always has a chance. It's a rook endgame. It's the highest percentage of draws are from rook endgames and endgames. And you're going through risk. So on queen b5, I play this very nice move, queen c8. So of course, queen c7 blunders queen e8 check. So I have to play queen c8 to keep this e8 square. But I'm also doubling down on this c file for some checks and invasions. So my opponent goes rook b1, and now I play rook c2, king here. And here, I get a little scared. And when you have that fear, and you don't validate that fear or confirm or deny that fear with calculation, that laziness of not calculating and just wanting that smooth win and not playing concrete as I should have in this position, that's what punishes my inability to find this winning combination. Pause the video to solve if you want to see it for yourself, but I basically had to look through a very scary line to win this instantly, pretty much. So this move, queen c3, wins pretty much on the spot. So I'm threatening queen f3 with mate, or queen d2 with mate here, like queen d2 or queen g2 or queen takes h2. And so my opponent's best counter is queen e8 with check and then queen takes. And this is very scary because perpetual checks, even checkmating threats, are pretty much on the cards here. And I have to find this queen f3 that defends this queen takes h5 check and threatens checkmate on g4. And after queen takes e6, I have to find queen g2, king here, queen takes, king here, queen takes, king takes, and then mate. Or if king here, queen g4 is mate. Or if queen h3, g5 takes, and then rook c4. And then I'm winning the queen. Not so clear, right? So I might have seen that in the game. I don't remember. I might have seen that in the game. But I'm going for this smooth approach, which is punishing because queen c3 is the best objective move by far. You need to find the -7 move over the -3 move every time. Sometimes there's no big difference, but here it's a big difference. So I go king h7, a prophylactic move, the second best move of the position, but officially a mistake, even though it's still winning because I had a win. So I'm just preventing against these queen e8s and queen b8s in the future and preparing this queen c3 invasion. But the problem is my opponent has a turn. Check on the king, and then I play king h6. And now rook b3. I have the choice between queen c5 or queen c4. Let me know what you would play here. Pause the video if you will. So queen c5 is aiming at queen f2. But what I had seen is that after queen c5, I'm just giving rook b8 with a mate threat on h8. It's very scary. I hope you can understand. Or queen c4, not what I want, trades into a rook endgame. And if I don't do one of those two moves, like what am I doing? Right? I don't have a move. So turns out queen c5 is completely winning because on rook b8, black has the very special blow, the only winning move, otherwise you're lost, g6. And turns out black has nothing and white has nothing and black has this queen f2 coming in. Like insane. G6, there's no mating threats, there's nothing on this king here, suddenly black is winning. But I played queen c4, going for a smooth, kind of slow-pressed endgame, which is kind of the theme of today. So queen takes, rook takes. And the thing about this is that I'm up a pawn, but it allows direct counterplay on both my pawns. So I go rook takes, gaining a second pawn up, and now after rook takes, king g6, and my idea is to go king f5 and be completely winning when after rook f7, I don't even care about this pawn because this one is marching through. My opponent plays rook e7 here, and now I'm at the most confident I am in the game because I'm completely winning. And only thing I have to do is do a little details here. So I play d4, which is a winning move. This is perhaps a more comfortable win. Rook a6, there's no counterplay whatsoever, and you're getting d4 in. So I play d4, kind of rush this, and then after rook takes e6, I play d3. And now he plays rook d6, and I don't know what I had in mind, but suddenly I panic. What I had in mind kind of just kerfuffled, and I suddenly see that I have trouble winning anymore. And so I calculate, and finally I find a win for black. I go like this. On my chair. Finally the game was over. It was not the smoothest of conversions, you know? So I play rook e4. And you can see that eval bar. My opponent takes, I take, and probably like here, I realized that what I calculated was completely wrong, in that after e6, e2, d2, e7, d1 queen, and e8 queen, I had queen g4 check, and after king down is forced, I had imagined, calculated from before this rook d4 move, that I had queen e4 here, which is clearly not possible. I had hallucinated a pawn on f4, which I guess is a completely human mistake, but I had hallucinated this, which forces a queen trade, and then this outside pass pawn completely decides the game. But imagine you're in this position and you realize you don't have that anymore, and now it's just equal. And you start from completely zero. And not only that, it's an equal position. You don't even have your advantage anymore. Complete nightmare, the theme of this video. So I play queen g4, and here I take like a ton of time. I had 50 minutes on my clock. So like to miss that, and I calculated this twice. That's the most frustrating part. I calculated this twice, I validated it in my mind, and I played it out super fast, and it didn't work. So the really frustrating part about this is that I can't not give out this pawn. Like king here, and I had seen that my opponent can go for check, king here, check, king here, check, and like just like an easy draw, I thought, if I keep here. So I was like, why don't I play h4? So I want to go h3 with some mating threats. This is a good recipe here. My opponent can go queen here, and if he's greedy and he wants to take this pawn, he can be lost. So let's say queen takes a7, loses to mate in 4 here, after well, just checkmate in 3 here, right? With after h3. But my opponent played really well, actually. He played queen h3, queen a3 check, king d2, queen a2, and he waits for my king to go down to always keep this mating threat, otherwise he can just take the pawn. And then he goes check, and then he goes takes. And now, it's still a draw. It's still equal, because I have this h3 move, only move, by the way, king down. And I have to find, one of two moves here to draw the game. Otherwise, I lose. And the moves are so hard to find. I have to find queen e2, forcing queen f2, and then queen e4. And I had seen queen e2, but after queen f2, I was like, I have nothing. I have to keep checks, but I have nothing. But queen e4 keeps a lens on this g2 square, and I guess I had seen like queen f1, right? Wins my pawn. And after king d2, queen takes, now black has a draw with check, like diagonal check, so the queen can't come in. And the queen now serves as a blockade for its own king. So king g2, queen e4. King g1, queen check. King here, queen e1, so the queen can never interfere. If queen f3, queen g2, right? That's still probably a draw. Wait, this is a draw, no? No, this is winning. Oh yeah, it's check, right? So queen e1, king g2, check. King here, check. So I missed that. I missed that whole thing. And me missing that was the loss. So I played king here. And now he finds check, gets my king away from the annoying squares, and now can get his king out. And I don't have queen e2 with the mating idea. And I'm simply lost here. I suffer for 15, 20 more moves until it's completely over, and he finds this really nice queen e3 when this queen has no checks or defenses towards queen f2 checkmate, and I lose. And the rating that was put on the pairings was different than his actual FIDE rating, because they put national ratings for some reason, which I'm completely against. Put FIDE ratings on that board. Like, it's just simpler. Like, nobody cares about national ratings anyways. So on the board, his rating was 1850. I went to check his FIDE rating after the tournament. I wouldn't do that to myself during the tournament. His FIDE rating is 1750. To put this in context, my current rating, I am a competitive, very, very active chess player who plays a chess tournament once every month. My very active rating right now is peaked at 2091, my highest ever. And I just lost to the lowest rated opponent I have played in the past 6 months to a year. Absolute nightmare in round one. I lose the maximum amount of points that you can when playing a lower rated opponent, which is 17.8, which is basically 18 FIDE rated points. I am down 18 FIDE on this Friday night with 4 more FIDE rated rounds to go and a night of sleep that I somehow have to get through. An absolute nightmare of the tournament. So what do? I attempt to sleep that night. I did not sleep well. So I show up the next morning, I have the white pieces, and I'm playing a kid. Of course, underrated kid was playing up last round, and he's trying to get back into this tournament with a win and feast on my carcass. He knows I'm vulnerable. He knows that I lost a huge upset last round, and he knows I'm vulnerable, and he's coming, and he's excited to play me. So I go e4, he goes c5, and we get into the Sveshnikov Sicilian, which I haven't played against since April, the Reykjavik Open final round. And so I think of my database at this point, and I go, everything that he must have seen about me was the same line here. So when he was reviewing my games and trying to see what I play against his opening, he must have seen unanimously knight d5. So he's expecting knight d5. So the night prior, I was preparing all night something I have never played before against the Sveshnikov, or at least not in like 12 years. And I play bishop g5, which is the main line, which is very surprising. It's the main line, so it's the line he knows the best. But, you have to be a more complex player in chess as you play more, and you have to divulge into lines that you haven't played before, so try new things. And the best time to do it is against new opponents, lower-rated opponents, pardon. So I go bishop g5, a6 is the main line, knight goes back, and now b5 threatening b4, the fork, so I go knight d5, still playing mainline theory, and after bishop e7, I trade here, which is still mainline. Now you can play c4, but it's seen as a little bit more dubious and equalizing, whereas c3 keeps a small edge. This is, major engines say this. And the idea of c3 is like 2 or 3-fold. You're blocking b4 in the future, you're playing against this knight on c6, and you're clearing the c2 square to bring back your knight into the game. So castles, and now I go knight c2, and here, okay, so castles is not the main move, or it's the old main line, and I think the new main line is bishop g5 now, but he goes castles, so I go knight c2, anticipating. And from here on out in the mainline Sveshnikov, it's very important to know that this is a themes-based opening. So theory will only get you so far, 10, 12 moves in, but it's your grasp of themes and mastery of how to apply those themes for white and black. So black wants to get rid of this backwards d-pawn by pushing this d-pawn to d5 eventually. Or if they can trade and force me to trade back with a pawn, rendering this not a weakness anymore, that is a huge accomplishment for black as well. As white, you want to bring your knight that was previously out of the game back into the game with knight ce3, grasp firmly on this d5 square and never let this pawn push on d5. You also want to stop these breaks on f5 and b4. And so after rook b8, which is also he's still in book. He plays fast. I play h4 here. It's you want to take the g5 square, and black can't take because you have queen h5, which wins a piece. If the bishop moves, then you take here. So he goes back, and he's still in book, but at this point, I'm out of book here. Bishop e7, I didn't know this was a move. It's also the first time I'm playing this, but it's kind of odd, right? He's moving his bishop for a third time in the game, and he's not improving the piece. Even though he's still in book, nothing against it, but I just don't understand the logic of this. I was expecting g6. I think that is a theory, but I'm not sure. Or bishop e6. So bishop e7, slightly odd move to my eyes, but I go knight ce3, doubling down on this d5 knight and taking up this f5 square once more to prevent this f5 push. And so now bishop e6. Okay. So I go bishop d3, doubling, tripling down on f5, and now he develops with queen d7 once more. And basically, I get out of his book with queen f3. Very obviously, I get out of his book because he's like, what is this? I think main is g4. Correct me in the comments. I think main is g4 or bishop c2. So you want to firmly grasp that d5 knight. You want to go bishop c2, maybe bishop b3. So those are plans, but queen f3 is definitely not a move. I had seen it as a theme, but here it doesn't apply in this specific position. So you also have to know when to apply the themes in specific positions, right? So bishop d8. And this is a typical Sveshnikov move. Magnus is a big fan of this. Whenever he played the Sveshnikov, I think in the 2018 World Chess Championship match against Fabiano Caruana, he placed his bishop here on d8 very handily. What it does is that it plays completely against my knight here on d5, and it looks so ornamental, but it's such a strong bishop. It's such a strong defensive piece. So I go queen g3, axing my queen on that king. You could say that. King h8, prophylactic. And now I go rook d1, which is a very nice move. I'm going to go bishop c2 and firmly press on this knight, and also behind it, the weak, undefended, or very weakly defended d6 pawn here. So knight e7, he's putting pressure on my knight. And the last thing that I want, you guys, is knight takes, bishop takes, pawn takes, and now black has no weaknesses anymore, and he can go f5. So I have to play this bishop c2, tripling down on my knight so I can take back always with a piece and not a pawn. I don't want to close that file on my own self. So he goes for bishop e6 here. Very interesting move that gives me a lot of options and some play. I can take here, I can take here. I have some choices here. So my opponent has the bishop pair. That's one big thing that black has in this position. So I could just go ahead and get that bishop pair for myself. But I thought that after knight takes, rook takes, he's going to get some d5 play in. And I'm not so comfortable with that. Bishop b3, and this was the right line, although still pretty equalizing. I think we can agree on that. But anyways, I took the knight on e7, and after queen takes, I went knight f5. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and you can argue that I create an imbalance, 4 against 3 on this king side, and I'm preparing a potential kingside attack. You could say that. But also, I'm not conforming or giving d5 really quickly because my bishop is going to grasp this e4 square, and then d5 is going to be mine. So rook f8, bishop e4, and now he goes for b4, a very interesting idea. Objectively, it's inaccurate because of what I've played, but if I take here, he has d5. And suddenly, I'm just so not comfortable. My king is left stranded in the center, and this can go really badly for me. So I go c4, just avoiding everything. Again, along with the themes, you're grasping that square on d5. So that was the clue to me that c4 was the best move. And this is the punishing move. Although the concession of c4 is that I'm giving this outpost for this bishop, magnificent bishop this bishop is going to be after he plays bishop d4. b3, but white still has the upper hand here because of the breakthroughs. So this entire game has now changed, flipped on its back, and now it's all about breakthroughs. So white has a breakthrough on the king side if I can break through with my pawns and open up on the king here, and black has a breakthrough on the queen side. If black can trade here on b3, open up that a file and infiltrate, then I could be in trouble. So it's kind of a race on each side of the board, neck and neck here. So he goes a5. He sees that and he knows his plan. So the nature of my advantage is king f1, and this is what the computer gives me, and with a potential attack, which is insane. Like, who's playing king f1 in this position? So I played h5, which is, I'm not saying like my move is so natural and angelic. This is a bad move, but yeah, I should have played probably castle and slowly built up my attack as the engine says. So h5, what's the problem of h5? Because clearly I want to play a breakthrough here, and it is convincing, but after h6, suddenly our plans are not so easy. And this queen g5 comes in, and call it an amateur mistake, but h5 equalizes this game because all my breakthroughs are gone. Very interesting. So I go queen g4, and I just play the slow game here. Rook h3, rook fb8, bishop d5, and as you can see, this position is quite closed and quite boring. And this against the kid is exactly what you want. I'll tell you a little anecdote of when I was a kid. I played an older man, and it was a super boring game like this, and after like 10, 25 moves, I just collapse. And after the game, my dad comes to pick me up at the chess club, and he asks me in front of my opponent, while meeting my opponent, he says, "Why did you lose, Zach?" Just out of, pure asking me. And I literally said, and I remember because it got a big laugh, but I was totally serious. I said, the game was boring. The game was boring. I didn't want to play. As a kid, I detached from the game when I didn't see a way out for myself, and it felt just boring, trash. The kids disconnect from the chess game when it gets a little too boring or unemotional or nothing to play for. And here, my opponent gets the same thing. After queen e4, I believe it was around here, he literally offers me a draw, and in his non-verbals, he plays rook c7 now, and plays the piece and does like this, like a little, it could be any move, because this is a dead draw, why are you playing, Zach? That's basically what he's telling me, non-verbally. And that's when I know I've got him. Thing is, he is right. This is a complete draw on paper. There's no breakthroughs for white, and black is the one actually with some chances here, I would say. I mean, you have some chances if you can try to infiltrate, but white doesn't have much going into this. But psychologically, I've got him. Psychologically, my opponent wants a draw and is now playing for the maximum result for him, a draw. Psychologically, I have won this game. I have conquered his mind. King f1. Oh, I played king f1 just at the wrong moment. Okay, king f1. I can legally not castle anymore, so king f1 makes sense. Bishop c5, and now rook g3. You know, it's really funny. The chess material you surround yourself by is what you end up being as a chess player. I just cracked open a chapter of Breaking Chess Principles by Evgeny Bariv, who's now Canadian. And I'm on the chapter of do not castle, of like when to not castle and it's actually good for you. And in the weekend after I crack open that chapter, I literally play king f1 and don't castle. It's insane. So bishop c5. Okay, rook g3. And now he goes rook e7, and we're just shuffling pieces for a long, long time until we get to this position. And now I think of rook g6 for a very long time, but my opponent is bored and does not see rook g6. So he's out of the board, he's circling around, he's sitting back down, he's bored, he's like, why is my opponent thinking right now, right? Meanwhile, I'm putting every single brain cell that I have into rook g6, but I can't find it. It's just not convincing enough. I had rook g6, takes, rook takes, and after queen f8, I didn't see enough with f6, but apparently this is winning. I mean, you're sacrificing a full rook. It has to be ultra convincing. But here, yeah, I was scared of some rook f7 things, I remember, because I can't really take anyways. It was just not convincing, but it's completely winning. Or it's big advantage. So I go queen c2, and I say, why don't I just bring my position a little bit better? My opponent is literally like playing non-moves, like he's trying to get this thing over with, and every move he's doing this thing where he's bringing his hand up, like very obviously he's detached from the game emotionally, which is again huge upper hand. So I go queen d3, and that was the part where my opponent is winning. I kind of freak out after I play this move. He has this d5 push, which I felt was scary. I didn't know he was winning. It has an advantage for black, so black puts pressure on c4, and when I take, he can double here and infiltrate. And basically I have nothing with my two rooks standing still here. But he misses it. He plays bishop c5, and now I go queen e4. Goes bishop back, queen d5, and now he goes bishop here. And again, I shuffle, and now he goes king h7. And at this moment, in this moment only, I start to see things. I said, if rook g6 and I get to take here, and then I get to sack my rook on the king because it's all forced, it's check, then I get to win. You see what I'm saying a little bit? So I go queen d2. So I'm kind of threatening like this idea of like this, but it's still not firm in my mind, you know? So he goes king h8 and I go rook h3. And I'm kind of threatening this, but again, not really, because it's not my turn. So I'm just kind of playing, you know? So he goes rook a7 now. And now I seriously consider rook g6. And after a while of calculating, I go rook g6, which is a brilliant move. Sacrificing a full rook for a pawn and an attack and weakening of the king. 3 big elements. So f takes and now pawn takes. And now this is my idea. I'm threatening mate in 3 moves. Rook takes, pawn takes, queen takes with check, forcing rook here, and queen takes supported by the pawn, which would be checkmate. So my opponent has to play one of 2 moves, queen f8 or rook down. Queen f8 supporting this gives f6, and I found only wins here. To me, it was very convincing that this is winning because I'm threatening f7. And if you move the queen, I'm mating, right? If you move the queen now, I'm mating with this. So the queen and rook and king are so trapped, and the logic part of it to me was this rook worth 5 is his rook up that I'm winning in the next moves or 2. So this is winning, and my opponent plays rook gd8. And now I have only moves to win the game. Pause the video to solve, white to play and win. Here, the win is rook takes, which I looked at. It's the first thing you look at. It's what you're threatening, right? But after king here, check, king here, and I see nothing for myself. Check, king here, the king's entirely safe, and that's why my opponent played rook d8 very conveniently. But here, I have queen d5 instead of bishop check, which I missed, candidate moves. And after king here, rook h5, and g4, g5 is unstoppable, and white is winning. I missed this and I played bishop d5 instead, cutting off the king here and directly reinstilling this threat of rook takes to h6 check. My opponent goes rook dd7, the only move, and now black is winning, but we don't know this. And again, what's really helping me here is that my opponent's defending. Yes, he's defending very well, but he's only thinking of defending, and if he can see the light of day, maybe a draw. Right? He's still in that philosophy. He's not in the winning philosophy. He hasn't thought of a win since move 15. So now I go for the same plan as we saw, g4 with g5 intentions. And here is the critical moment of the game for my opponent. He has to find pawn to e4. When after g5 the queen is free, and queen takes first of all, but I have nothing here, and the queen invades, and I'm cooked. But he goes bishop b6, because he's also, and this is what I forgot to tell you, he's down on time now. So he has 5 minutes to his clock, and he's playing quite fast. Now, he should have taken the extra 2 minutes to find something like this, but he's thinking of how do I stop this g5? He's constantly in a passive decision mode and decision making, right? So he wants to play bishop b6 for bishop d8, ultra passive, removing an attacker, which is this bishop, which is triumphant here. And so I go bishop e6 first. If I go g5, there's this queen takes. So I have to defend my pawn now. And now I'm threatening g5 for real. And he goes bishop d8. So he's sacking the exchange. He would still be a piece up, so it's not really a sack. But he's, more importantly, blocking g5. But now I go rook h5. And once again, it's really not obvious how he defends this. His only move, which grants him a small advantage, is e4. When after e4, g5, he has some queen a1, king g2. He has to play very precisely. King g2 and now queen c3. And now he's threatening queen f3 and the queen trade. Fantastic. But he plays rook e7 instead. And now I go g5 and I'm breaking through. This game is all about breakthroughs. If you got the breakthrough on your side, you're winning. Queen f8 and now pawn takes. And again, my opponent was really playing nicely because he takes here after a few moments. And I can't find the win. I'm calculating super hard, but try to find it. White to play and win. I mean, the obvious move, rook takes, is the solution. But after king here, rook check, king here, I was looking at rook h5, but then I was like, oh, there's just rook takes e6. And here I have nothing after queen check and then king here, and then the king will be safe on g8. But this works for white. Rook here threatening check and then mate. But then rook here, queen check, and then king here. I don't have mate, right? This rook h7. Previously, my bishop was guarding g8. That would have been mate. But after king here, I didn't see the option queen h6. And if the king goes back, I win the queen. And if the king goes down, it's mate here. This I missed. So I played bishop back to d5. Again, super prophylactic. I'm not letting my opponent sack his good rook for my bishop. Meanwhile, I am down a rook the entire time here. I'm like 10 moves in, down a rook. Crazy, but I have a killing attack. So rook h7, he finds us with low time. He probably has 2 minutes on his clock. He really takes a lot of time here for this move. It's a fantastic move, you guys. He's sacrificing a rook, a full rook back. But it's the only move defending against rook takes h6. And now I only can content myself with a small advantage. +1. A few moves later, though, and this is the practical part of the game, he plays queen f6, the blunder, because he has low time. And when you have low time, you miss your opponent's blows. You don't necessarily blunder a full piece, but you miss what your opponent has against your next move. And I've lived through that often as not the perpetrator, but the other party, right? So queen f6 and try to find the win. Queen a8. Geometrics of queen a8. And not only that, he has to go down, right? Because if he goes up with his king, I have queen g8 mate. So he has to go down with the queen. But now I go rook takes h6. Second brilliant move of the game, sacrificing a full rook. If the bishop takes, I take here with mate next turn. So he has to move the king. And now I go rook check. And if the king goes down, I win the queen and the game. So king h7. And here you have to find, again, geometrics, queen h1. And right by my bedside, I have this book called Invisible Moves, which I've been basically reading every single night for the past days. I'm like halfway in, which is pretty good. And it's all about this geometry, moves that to the human eye are impossible or hard to find. And I had started reading it before this tournament, and it directly affected me finding these moves in stressful situations. Queen a8, queen h1, geometrics. Insane. So yeah, northwest, southeast, Seattle to Florida, queen h1 check, and my opponent goes bishop h4, and now after rook g4, I am 1, and my opponent resigns. He can't do anything to stop this. Queen f3 was more precise, winning in a more minute fashion, but I'm very happy. I needed a win. So I'm on -18. After this win, I'm on like -16. I didn't calculate at the time. Never calculate your live rating during a tournament. This is the worst thing you can do to yourself, good or bad. If it's good, you're gonna create a ceiling for yourself. If it's bad, you're gonna keep thinking about it during your games. So never calculate your live rating, even though it's very easy to compute. But I still have a game. A second game that day. It's a weekend tournament. So one game on the Friday, which I lost. I just played the game in the morning. Second game on that Saturday. And I am playing against another youngster with the black pieces. And this was a special game because I had been learning the Caro-kann from scratch thanks to our sponsor Chess Reps for a month and a half. I tried to get a Caro-kann in my last tournament. I didn't have a single game against e4. And finally, I had a game against e4 with the black pieces, and I played the Caro-kann. And I had memorized these lines, played against it. What's great about Chess Reps is that it's space repetition. So you keep practicing it until you just know it. And also, there's instructions on the understanding part of the game, which I think a lot of softwares mess up and don't do well. But I understood while learning the moves. So d4 and d5, and my opponent plays the exchange Caro-kann, which is more of a positional system. Thankfully, I knew my lines. C takes, queen takes I don't think is good. And now bishop d3, and now knight c6. So c3, and in my personal repertoire, I have queen c7, and I think I have a g6 line. But I was playing the Chess Reps, knight f6. And Chess Reps has like an e5 soon. If white plays knight e2, I think it's e5 here. And if knight f3, it's bishop g4. But my opponent played bishop f4 and got me out of book. But thankfully, I knew what to play here. Because you have to go beyond the material that you're instructed by. But I knew that you have to play g6 here. This is a very common setup in this variation of the Caro-kann, and yeah, so you're fianchettoing your bishop, and also, not always, but also you're challenging white's good bishop. So the d3 bishop is a good bishop because it's not aligned, it's not the same color as the pawn structure. So this is theoretically his bad bishop, even though it's a very good bishop, right? So I trade off this great bishop for my bad bishop, because if I play e6 all the way down here, my bishop lays dead for the rest of the game. So I go bishop f5, knight e5, and now I trade up this bishop, and my opponent plays very well this knight positioned here in the Carlsbad structure, which is what we're about to have here. The knight positioned here on d3 or d6 is essential. It's very, very strong because it looks out at these two very valuable squares. So I go bishop g7, knight d2, and we castle, and now we develop, and I come up with this nice queen c8. My objective here is to go for queen f5, which is a square that I own, that my opponent doesn't yet have a grasp on, and for my queen is a fantastic square. So after rook e1, I go knight h5, and I'm attempting to win his bishop. I'm thinking of the endgame already. Because it's a positional game, you need to be thinking of the endgame so that when it's a one-result game, I need to win this, I have a good endgame, or at least I'm placed well to be able to convert the endgame. For example, I don't want to get into an endgame with no imbalances, and it's a rook endgame, because that would be most likely drawn if my opponent can hold. So I'm already trying to create an imbalance from the very early stages of the game. So queen f3, he defends his bishop. I'm very happy to see this because I can trade off my knight for his bishop. I think a little bit better would have been bishop e3, as the engine says. So this makes me happy, and now I go queen f5. And I'm already offering an endgame up, because I would be very happy with this bishop, even though this would grant me double pawns, is less bad than this terrific bishop here for a knight. But he refuses. He declines, plays queen g3. And now I have some play. So I have some plans now. So I equalize, which is good. With black, you want to equalize as soon as possible because it gets you more time to build an advantage. And this is it. After rook fe8, I'm trying to play e5. That is my plan. That is my breakthrough of the position. Albeit I could end up with an isolated pawn here, but e5 is the breakthrough that black wants to dismantle this pawn structure and enliven this bishop. So rook ac1, which is a move I didn't understand, and it's a bad move, and I punish with e5. Bang! Putting pressure on this pawn, threatening d4, threatening all kinds of things, and forcing, most importantly, d takes, and now knight takes, bishop takes. And after queen f3 is a very important moment in the game, the critical moment of the game, I will say. Here I have one move, more like one idea, that gives me a small edge here. See if you can find it for the black pieces. And it's all about what I was talking about, invisible moves. It's in the chapter alignment, which means that when pieces are aligned, you're most likely than not missing a move on the alignment. So the human eye is not trained to find the move queen f4 here, which is very understandable because I'm speaking from experience, I missed it. I'm threatening queen takes h2 and taking this knight. And I'm basically forcing this queen to trade off. And after takes, I have nice pressure on this knight, and I would be winning, actually. So rook ed1, rook e2, and I'm just blasting through this second rank, and I'm winning. So white has to play knight f1, defending this, and now I get to double pawns into a dream endgame. Double isolated pawns, an isolated pawn here, bishop versus knight. This, for me, would be enough to try to go and convert confidently. But I missed this, and I spent a lot of time here, but I couldn't find queen f4. I went for bishop f4. And it still does the same thing. I'm going on this pin, it's the same theme, but he finds rook ed1. So he's getting out of the file, he forfeits the file completely, and he defends his knight instead. And I don't have any infiltration, and I don't have any way to trade queens to infiltrate. So this was very tough for me. So I played queen e5. He kicks my bishop, because I was threatening to take. And now rook cb1, he's getting out of this pin. He's playing ugly moves, but they're the best moves of the position. And now I play a little a little tough move here. I play d4, which is really not good. I'm trying to trade off my isolated pawn, and I completely missed this tactic, knight c4, which just wins a pawn outright. Knight c4, I can complicate play with queen e2, but after queen takes e2, rook takes e2, rook takes d4, I mean, white is just up a pawn, clearly. But he misses it and takes my pawn very fast. I was like, oh, thank God. Like, the last thing I needed was a bad game. And so, yeah, things add up here. I have a quite good bishop, but usually the bishop is dominant over the knight. It's not the case here. His knight is so centralized and so strong. I would say it's 50-50. And I don't have an imbalance to play for here. The position is completely symmetrical in terms of pawn structures. So b4. I bring my bishop back on the long diagonal, we trade queens, and I get the small edge here because he lets me put pressure on this kind of rank that my queen is on. So my queen's out of play, but I still manage some pressure, and he forces a queen trade. And now I play a mistake that I will remember for a long time, because I thought this was a very smart idea, but it was not. Best was just continuing putting pressure. I don't need to touch this right now. I can keep this tension here on the dark squares. But I played this bad move, pawn to a4, which equalizes on the spot. I thought I was being very smart, forcing this pawn chain on the dark squares, and in the endgame, I would have an easy cherry pick, bishop b2, bishop takes a3. But this gives counterplay, so knight b5. He finds this, he plays so well, knight b5. And basically what happens is that we play this till the very end. So rook e6, very nice move, attacking my pawn by this pin, which is like just very creative move by my opponent, forces me to sack rooks, and now he takes this pawn and doesn't trade here. Trading here, I would be up a pawn, right? So he takes this pawn, attacks my rook, and now I play rook f5, which is the best move. Basically, I'm not letting him play rook a6, rook takes here, because I'm keeping a hold on the knight. So rook b7, and now I play bishop back to b2, knight d6, and basically he finds the right move here. King h3 I thought was the best move by far, but it allows play by the black pieces. I guess I get this in and I'll eventually win this pawn. He plays right king h1, which I would have never thought of. It looks like you're self-mating yourself, but it's not at all the case. The king is completely safe, and the best I have is perpetuals, which I don't want to draw. I'm playing for one result. So once again, h5, g5, and he plays this tremendous h3 move. If not, I had g4 next, threatening mate in 2. He plays this h3 move, giving his king some air. And now I do 2 checks to gain some time on the clock, some practical tricks. And now I go back with rook f6, finally. I couldn't find anything. Everything is a draw that I was calculating. But here, this gives me some ideas to win this pawn, but I completely missed this knight c3. I was like, I'm blocking knight c5, but then knight c3. And long story short, this is a drawn position after he takes my pawn. We have a draw, and my opponent, who made an upset earlier in the tournament, now has a draw against me, was feeling very happy after this game. So, a draw in round 3. I have 1.5 out of 3, and I'm probably down minus 22 at this point. But this is the thing that I will tell you, and that experienced grandmasters have said in a FIDE interview, which I'll show here.
How do you recover emotionally?
Sleeping. I don't know. Sleep.
How to deal with a bad game. You have to move on to this next point, and which was very crucial for me and helped me on the next day, is that I just took my mind completely off chess. I was at the tournament, as I said, with a French content creator, Julien, and we went to the tournament with a friend of ours, and all night we went to a bar. I didn't drink, never drink during a tournament, but we played pool. I had chicken wings. We ate after. We played some simulation golf, which I tried for the first time. I was bad in pool, but then I got good somehow, and I made like one of those backhand shots like this, like from the back of your, and I made it. Like, huge confidence boost. And basically my mind was off chess. Plus, our Airbnb had a jacuzzi, and we spent like 2 hours in the jacuzzi that night on the Saturday night, and still not a lot of sleep. But my mind was off chess and fresh for the next day. I made a good plan to move on from the depressing 2 results out of 3 and came into the last day playing against a familiar face to the people who watch the channel very often. If you saw the video in which I gained 78, 68 points in ELO in one weekend. I had a perfect Benoni against a guy in which I memorized 15 moves and destroyed him. And I was playing against him once again with the white pieces this time. And so he's psychologically a little bit hurt, probably from our last game, which was basically without mistake by me. I had like 97% accuracy, no mistakes, and blew him off the board, which must have been tilting because it was like I was playing like an engine. And here we are. I have the white pieces, and he plays the Caro-kann. Okay, the Caro-kann. I have so many different tools and different options to play against the Caro-kann, but I saw that he plays a certain way. I could find a straight line in the Tal variation, which I don't play. First time playing this in my life, but it's a super aggressive system against the Caro-kann, which can lean positional at times. It's an opening that can lean very positional, I feel. So he plays this h5 line, and now I go for bishop d3, and we trade off bishops. This is pretty much main stuff. And here he's accustomed to playing e6 online far majority. e6, bishop g5, and now queen a5 check. And he breaks from the tide. He plays something he only played 10 times in 10 blitz games, and I did not check before the tournament. He plays queen a5, bringing me out of book as soon as move 6. And so I don't know what to play here. I have so many options. c3, b4, bishop d2, knight d2, knight c3. So let's go by elimination. Knight c3, big no-no. You want your pawn structure to be clean. Bishop d2, yes, yes, attacking the queen. b4, risky gambit. If you don't know the moves, you might be in trouble. b4, I checked after the game, is a pristinely good gambit. Highly recommend to look this up. And it's trendy too amongst grandmasters, so do check it out for next time. Me too, I noted it for next time. And the move is knight d2, but only when you understand your opponent's idea. The queen a5 idea, this is called the Capablanca check, I believe, is destined to try to trade queens. Capablanca, ex-world champion, third world champion from 1921 to 1928, was known for wanting to trade queens as soon as possible. So I can see him, because he loved the endgame. He was the best endgame player of all time. So I could see him throw a check in just to try to trade queens with queen a6. And the thing is, if you know that knight d2 is the move here, because on queen a6, now white has enough to play c4. And this c-pawn is supported by this newly placed knight. But I didn't know this. I played bishop d2, the logical move, after like 10 minutes of thinking. And he goes queen a6, which is the idea. And now I go for something that I found very interesting at the time. I play pawn to e6. So yes, you can have your queen trade, but it's going to come with a few concessions here. You see, when my opponent takes my queen, okay, if you take here, I have some good stuff, like queen g6 and I'm winning. It's like +3. I'll go queen f7, these things. So my opponent's pretty much forced to take first, and now I'll do the in-between check, the Zwischenzug. E takes f7 check, king takes, and now pawn takes. And let's take stock right now. So, what does white have, what does black have? White has double isolated pawns, which is a big no-no usually, but because they're on a closed file, so it's hard to attack from the file itself, it's not that big of a weakness, honestly. These pawns are working better than if my pawn here was on c3 instead of d3. Because on c3 it would just control one square, whereas on d3 it's controlling 2 squares and 2 very nice outpost squares for the black pieces. So my pawns are acting as very nice protectors of some key squares in the center. A good way to look at it. Furthermore, my opponent has 2 major weaknesses, this g5 and e5 squares, both of which can be taken up by my knight at any time of convenience. So objectively, black has found equality in these lines, but practically I feel like there's a lot of value for the white pieces because of the weaknesses that lie there. Okay, as we develop, I'll tell you more about the positional things in this variation. So knight d7, knight f3, and now he goes knight h6. And this is a very powerful move. So you would think that this knight would develop to f6. No, this knight goes to f5, where it can attack both d4 and h4 and keep my knight disgruntled and having to defend this d4 pawn. So I go castles. And now he goes for e6, and this is where you need to play prophylactic chess. Here you need to see why black plays e6. And it's very obvious once you ask yourself this question. Black wants to develop the bishop to e6. So this pawn clearing the way for the bishop to e6. And so once you see that, you know what move to play, bishop f4. Oh, I didn't play bishop f4. I played rook e1 first. I'm threatening check to win the pawn. So inducing rook e8 and now bishop f4. Very good. This is inaccurate, but no, actually, okay, so engine wanted this, which I don't like, but that is objectively the best apparently. But this is very strong too. Practically has a lot of value. My opponent now goes bishop b4. And here he's attacking my rook, but what does he want with this move? So he's developing with tempo, but is he developing actually with tempo? Tempo would be hurting me. So I think to myself, why don't I just play rook e2 anyways? Because I want to anyways double my rooks on the weak pawn on the semi-open e file. So rook e2, not offering my opponent to discard his bad bishop and trade it against my knight. And Julian, during the weekend, as we're staying together, he's an IM, so he's very, very experienced, and he's 8 years older than me, so big value for me there, potentially, to just pick his brain. He told me what he finds fascinating about chess is that chess is like a debate. So your opponent will bring forth an argument on the board, and you have to counter that argument and prove his argument false. So he goes knight f5, I go knight bd2, and this is exactly how I felt the morning after this night of the game when he played bishop e7. So when my opponent plays his bishop for a second time in 3 moves, to reinstill it on f6 to pressure d4, I say to myself, I just won a big argument. Because if my opponent would have been happy with this move, if my opponent wouldn't have been happy with this move, he would have just played this immediately. So he loses 2 full moves and proving me right in that sense, right? So he's attacking h4, I defend with g3, and after bishop f6 attacking this pawn, I have the only move, knight b3, defending this. Okay. Now, after rook e7, this is the most instructive game of the tournament. There's no other game that will give you greater value because in this game, I put forth what is a very common theme in chess, and might I say, not to pat myself on the back too much, but this theme and positional strategy is perfectly executed here. First things first, we'll just put that to the side. And I do a minor thing before doing the major thing I just talked about. First things first, I want to create an imbalance. And part of that imbalance that I visualize for myself is trading my knight against this bishop. You always have to look at which trades you want when the position gets very positional like this and very strategic. If I can trade this knight against this bishop, I get all the dark squares for my bishop, and my bishop has a monopoly on these dark squares. So I would really want that. And after rook e7, I saw this fantastic move that would force me to gain his bishop with knight g5. Only thing is, it doesn't really because my opponent has king g6 giving this pawn, and then king f7 later winning this knight. So I can't really take this pawn here. So king g6, phenomenal move. We both missed that. He takes my knight and gives me the bishop and the dark squares with that. So that's a little bit small mission accomplished. Boom. And now on for the major thing. So after knight f6, I apply a theme that is very much known in chess as the principle of 2 weaknesses, or the rule of 2. And the rule of 2 entails that if you already created a 1 weakness in your opponent's camp, the way to win in chess, if you don't have a material advantage, is to create a second weakness as far as possible from that first weakness and press on that second weakness, press on that first weakness more, divide your opponent's pieces to defend those 2 weaknesses, and then you can put a sufficient amount of pressure to break through and win some material. And so if you were me, what would you play here? So the first weakness is here, this e6 backward pawn, and the second weakness I thought I could create on the queen side. And my rook isn't developed yet, which is perfect because it's intended that way. I go with pawn to a4. So my idea is to go pawn a5, pawn a6, and dislodge this structure. If I can get induce b6 in and weaken this c6 pawn, I can double my rooks on this semi-open file and put pressure on this second weakness. Another pro of this pawn being on d3 and not c3. So my opponent goes rook c7, which I found was a terrible move, and it is a bad move because it lets me bring my bishop back into the game, taking up all these really nice dark squares for free on tempo on this rook and dislodging this rook. And now I go a5. And my opponent plays a little bit rash here and plays the losing mistake of the game. Pawn to a6. And now it's all up to you. You have to find this marvelous idea that I found, because when I found it, I got a lot of joy, and I would love you to feel, if anything, an ounce of that joy, because it's really self-improving. White to play here and find the right plan. And when I saw this, I was like, it's actually game over because it's so strong. Here, white has a very simple idea. Black has stopped our pawn and forced, not having this weakness on c6, and instead the weakness lies on b7. This is the new weakness. This is the new target. So how do you put pressure on b7? It's a far-fetched pawn. You would love to go knight c5, but then knight takes d4 and attacking my rook, it's not worth it. But there is this very special move, an idea, rook a4, that does two things. One, prepares the rook to go to b4 to attack this pawn, and two, defends this pawn a second time, so that after rook e8 and now rook b4 attacking this pawn, rook e7, I can go with knight c5, and my pawn is defended by this rook, and my knight is not tied to this pawn anymore. And here I have sufficient pressure where my opponent cannot defend this pawn on b7. The rule of two. The more you know, And my opponent finds really good counterplay. He plays knight e8, very, very tricky. Here, if I were to take this pawn in any way, shape, or form, I'm allowing some counterplay with knight takes d4. Yes, this is the one. Deflecting my rook off the defense of my knight so that after rook takes, and it's equal, and even I would be losing because my opponent has all the play on that b file. So here is white to play and win. I was so focused on this for like 4-5 minutes, and then I find the right move that has nothing to do with this b7 pawn, and suddenly I see it and it's completely winning. Like black has nothing. And it's this really nice finesse, bishop g5. Incredible. Like black has no moves. You can either block or you can move your rook, but moving the rook off of e6 is not a good idea because I just take with a full pawn up. And if you block, which is what happened in the game, now there's knight takes b7. And the reason why knight e8 was played all this time ago is that when I play knight b7, I'm also threatening some knight d6 things. And after this takes, you can't play rook b8 here because of knight d6. And so this is back on the cards because of rook d6, knight d6, and I take this rook. So knight takes b7. My opponent plays rook e8. And now I am up a pawn. I just scoop back this pawn. I play this very important move, knight d6, trading off a pair of knights. And resulting position of this is that no breakthroughs from the black pieces right now. And so this pawn is being the hero of the game combined with this bishop. And I have allowed zero counterplay by my opponent with this rook and bishop working tirelessly on this file. My opponent plays e5, sacrificing a second pawn for some play because black's position was completely depressing, and now c5, and we end up in this position, which is pretty critical, where my opponent is bluffing. He's saying, look, I'm going in with knight e4 unless you take my knight and you want this trade. And this is where you have to call your opponent's bluff and calculate through it. So I calculate through it, I see it's winning, I take. If the rook takes here, I have rook e2, winning this rook here. So king takes is forced, now f7, and now his rooks are completely tied. I have rook e2 coming in, and I can just trade rooks, king f3, and now you need to, I learned this from the first game of the tournament, you need to have some finesse that's extremely forced and extremely precise to prevent counterplay. We learned our lesson with that, and here, f5. Breaking through for my king, takes king f4, and after king takes a5, my opponent's going to come back here and create some counterplay. None of that, rook b7. He realizes his rook is tied, his king is tied, he's got nothing, and this is just coming through king takes, king g7. It's going to be over. And my opponent resigns. So I get one win on this first game on the Sunday, and I emerge with 2.5 out of 4, coming into my last game with the black pieces against Ting and Ryan Wu, who's another kid, my third kid of the tournament, who plays e4 against me. 3 e4s this tournament. Really nice. And so, as I promised, a second French defense for all the French defense players out there. And I played the same exact line, bishop d7. As long as this is not on the database and my opponents don't watch my YouTube videos, I'm completely fine with this line. I just love this line. It's a secondary line. They're usually confused and out of book. And again, it worked tremendously here because he played pawn to a3, which is usually not very much the move because black has this f6 that has proven very good in play. But I played the second most popular / result yielding move, c4, which closes the position. He goes bishop e2, and now I go knight ge7. I want to go here, which is not the right idea. I think I had a correction for this. I think it was f6 here. But okay, he goes knight bd2, I go knight f5, and now after b4, he's kind of bluffing. He's kind of saying, look, do what you got to do here. If you don't take en passant, I'll have this nice closed off queen side, and then on the king side, all the play will be had, and it will be most likely drawish. So I have to take, to me. But it's a mistake, because it allows knight takes b3, and then c4 will be strong, kind of breaking through against my pawn structure. But he plays queen takes, which is a mistake, because after knight a5, queen a2, I have the opportunity to play bishop a4, super strong move, which I missed. I played b5 instead, which is a little inaccurate for very detail-oriented reasons. But b5 practically is a phenomenal move. Look, I'm preventing every breakthrough in the book here, and this backward pawn is just so depressing. After castles rook c8, you can see it magnified by bishop b2 here, like terrible bishop having to defend this pawn on c3. So I'm already confident that I equalized very early on in the game, which we love on this channel. Bishop e7, I'm trying to castle myself, and here my opponent comes up with none other than a brilliant idea. I mean, like, I wouldn't say this often about my opponents or me, but this idea stunned me for 25 minutes. Like, he played pawn to a4 here, sacrificing a pawn so that after takes, he has bishop a3 trading off his bad bishop for my good bishop. And so I just didn't know what to play here. And I thought for like 25 minutes, the best move is knight h4. It's like impossible to find. To me, this is very, very hard move to find. It insists upon bishop takes, queen takes. And white's idea is obviously to regain the pawn, but here I would have takes, swaying the knight away from these squares. And now I have knight c4 when bishop takes, and bishop takes, queen takes. And it's as if I'm a pawn up, because this knight is so strong, dominant on this knight, and this backward pawn might as well be not a pawn. It's just black acts as if they're a pawn up here. Fantastic move. Like, it's very hard to find. So anyways, I trade. And I play rook c7. I'm trying to double here on the c file, but also I'm trying to play my queen. I think I was trying to play like queen a8, queen c6, something like this. So bishop d1. And I find this nice knight c4, takes. And this is my opponent's big mistake, big practical mistake in this game. He takes 15 minutes for this very simple move, in my opinion. Knight takes c4. And I asked him after the game, I was like, this was your mistake. You thought 15 minutes on such a very easy move. And he was like, yeah, this is the first move I thought of. He was just overthinking. And it doesn't put him in time pressure now, but this idea is like how white kicks my rook and wins back the pawn, which he saw instantly, but he was debating between two moves. He was debating between bishop here and bishop d1. A bishop d1, bishop here, bishop d1 to try to draw, or knight d2. This is the turn, actually, which he took 25 minutes on. Or 15 minutes. So he plays knight d2 after 15 minutes. A very obvious move to regain this pawn. My rook is clearly overloaded, cannot defend the pawn anymore, and now he regains the pawn. But he takes it a little too soon. because after he takes right now, bishop takes, queen takes, and now I have queen g5. Queen h4 was a little bit more precise. Or knight h4, pardon. Knight h4 first, and then knight h4 taking up this f3 square from the knight to then go queen g5 was the most precise. But I go queen g5, same theme, wrong execution, let's say. Knight f3, attacking my queen, and I go queen f4. And my opponent finds the only move that equalizes, queen d1. What an absolute banger of a move. My opponent played this game fantastic. So queen d1. Rook fc8, queen d3. I'm trying for things. I'm trying for anything here. You know, if this knight is off of this d4 square, I can take here. So I have some ideas in my mind. So I go for g5. I'm trying to kick this knight, but to me it's too obvious, and it's not objectively good. Objectively good was h5, h4 plan with probably h3. This would have been more objective. I feel so, yeah. So I play g5, and he responds very well. g3 best move, and after queen g4, king g2 with this threat. And now I trade knights off. And as we said, you need to trade the right pieces off, and I feel like knight h4 was... I have to keep the knights on if I want to try to win this game, especially if I can plant a knight here in the future. But anyways, we keep all the major pieces. It's an equal endgame with all the major pieces on the board, and the only thing, the only imbalance, the only struggle is this backwards c3 pawn against my a7 pawn, which is not very exciting. It's not a very exciting endgame. I'm not going to lie to you. I wouldn't lie to you guys. So it's just a little bit of shuffling, piece shuffling, some maneuvering until I go rook c4 and my opponent goes queen b3 and misses for one move because he's bored again, like it's the same theme. I make my kid opponents bored until they detach and they kind of lose sight of a small detail, which doesn't matter to me, but means the world, which doesn't matter to them, but means the world to me. And that's this queen f3. And here this allows pawn takes g3. And if the pawn takes, I can take here. When pawn takes, rook takes c2. And now I win. I can't execute this right away because c takes, rook takes, queen takes. And I saw queen takes f7. This loses. Oh, this loses. Check. Forcing the king to take. And now queen g6, trading queens. And now I have that endgame that I wanted from round one. Oh, so here, but still draw. So white can force a draw here, which he would have found. He's a very strong opponent. But yeah, white can force a draw here. So still, I would not have played this. But anyways, that's why I take here first, to open up the second rank on this king. And after queen takes, he can't take with the pawn because rook takes, queen takes. He maintains this idea. So after rook takes, he would take here. And then I have no tactic. But this allows me to enter the rook endgame with some chances because I have so much pressure built up on this c3 pawn. And here we are. My opponent, though, is low on time. Another big practical edge that I have that is not present on the board here for you to see. So pawn to a5. I ameliorate my pawn's position because I don't want it to be traded for this pawn on c3. That would be the absolute worst. I need to keep pressure here while slowly building up my pawn on this queen side. So pawn to f3, king g7, and it's objectively an equal endgame, but it's hard to play. And this is how hard it is to play, f4 being the losing move. Why? Because it lets me go... No, so this was bad by me. It lets me go pawn to f5. I get to close up here, and I think I get this, and that's what the engine loves. So I get to infiltrate on my own terms. But I play king g6, and then rook check, king f5. I have a small edge. Now I'm winning. Because he's trying to play for a draw. He's only thinking of a draw because it's a drawish endgame, it's a rook endgame, and it's equal, and all rook endgames are equal, especially with equal material. Draw, 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 draw. He's low on time, the pressure's on him, and he plays a nonsensical move trying to defend this when king d3 was the best, keeping this file. And this is really deciding because this lets me get this file eventually. I play h5 first and h4 to get this g3 square. And now this game is completely won by me. Because after takes, king g4, he thinks he's winning a pawn or putting pressure and forcing my rook to be passive, but no. Rook g8 check. Finesse. This finesse touch is very, very important. If king takes, I have rook c7 ending the game with mate in 1 on the next turn. So he has to go back, and this allows this rook infiltration with rook g3. And now I have the same pressure with my rooks, but I have a third and fourth target. Second and third target with f4 hanging, h3 hanging, c3 hanging. Too many weaknesses. The piñata is blown up, and I take one pawn, I take two pawns, I take three pawns, a third pawn, and after rook check, he resigns because I think I'm gonna trade rooks here. I thought this was the end here. Yes, so I get to trade a pair of rooks, and from there on, we both understand this is a winning endgame. And so I end the tournament with 3.5 out of 5, still losing immensely. From my peak rating of 2091, I am 2079 at the end of the month of October. Actually, the new ratings are out. Let me check them. I usually check my rating on the first of every month, every like clockwork. It's November 3rd. I'm lacking. 2079 is my new ratings. FIDE has a very good rating estimator. I've never been off by 1 point estimating my rating with FIDE. But yeah, my new rating went down 12 points. I am now 21 points away from the big 2100, but it's going to come eventually. It's all part of the game. Extremely good experience learned. What did we learn? Keep your cool in moments of tension, especially when you have a lot of time on your clock. When you're playing down and you're up, don't be overconfident. Calculate concrete lines, even though it's a easy positional, soft position to massage. Sometimes the best way is to be concrete and not massage. When playing down, make your opponent feel like the best result they can get is a draw. That is such a key part of my 3 wins that weekend. And most importantly, have fun. It was very easy to be depressed, be angry. A lot of players are angry after a loss. I'm just depressed. After a bad loss like that, I'm just depressed. That's how I feel. You know, I don't have an ounce of anger in me. I feel like that's a weird emotion. I try to repress it as much as possible. And, you know, even in the games where I had to win and I didn't win, like I drew, I still managed to have fun. And after hours, I had fun with my content creator friend and our other friend. And, you know, that's what was truly good about this weekend. And although I lost 12 points, I won an experience. I have no tournaments in the month of November, but in December, I will be going on a 3-tournament stretch in Europe with my friend I am Kostyakowicki, who is from the US, and we're doing 3 tournaments in a row together. It's going to be a ton of fun. I can't wait to show you the results of those tournaments and how we move from there on. It will be my first time in Europe since the Reykjavik Open, and my second time in Europe since me living in Europe and throwing you recaps from the cornfields. Thank you so much for watching another recap, and see you in the next video. Subscribe!